Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. What can various religions, religious leaders, and followers do to help create a better world and to reduce conflict? What role does the Religions for Peace organization play in helping them to bridge the gaps? We'll be back in just a moment to talk about these and other important issues. Welcome back to our program. There's a multitude of challenges confronting all 7.3 billion people on planet Earth, and we all have a major role to play, especially religions and religious leaders and the members of the various congregations. My guest today is someone who's going to focus on this and talk about his group, the Religions for Peace organization. My guest today is Dr. William Vendley. Dr. William Vendley is the Secretary General of the World Conference of Religions for Peace. Dr. Vendley, a U.S. national, has an M.A. from Maryknoll School of Theology and a Ph.D. from Fordham University. Dr. William Vendley, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Bill, thank you very much. Delighted to be with you.
I appreciate you being with me today. Let's start right at the beginning. What is the Religions for Peace organization? When was it formed? Why was it formed? And basically, what is your mission?
Religions for Peace was formed in 1970. Some 250 religious leaders from all continents came together and co-founded it. They weren't starting a new religion, Bill, but they were convinced that they could respect their differences and still align religion as collaborative partners in trying to tackle the big challenges that the human family faces.
Exactly. Now you have a large membership, I should say. How many different types of, or how many religious organizations do you have in the Religions for Peace organization, and how many countries are you operating in now?
Well, all of the world's historic living religions are represented. This includes the associations of indigenous religions, as well as the very big membership religions like Christianity, like Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and smaller religions, Judaism, Jains, Sikhs, Baha'is, all quite a rainbow of remarkable religious faith traditions.
Yes, exactly. You've got the waterfront covered there. You have
it
a
really
large constituency.
We're in 90 countries, growing about to 5 to 10 countries every single year. And these religious communities take ownership of their own national interreligious council, and it's solely dedicated to advancing collaboration for peace.
Mm-hmm. Now, our viewers can go to www.rfp.org to get more information about what we're talking about today.
Indeed.
We see that there is a tremendous amount of diversity in this world. Without a doubt, there are over 6,000 languages. We have so many different cultural mores around the world. We have various ethnic groups around the world, religious organizations. How does your organization sort of provide, or not sort of, but provide a bridge amongst all of those diverse cultural, religious, economic, social interests that are out there?
Bill, we do it in the most practical way you can imagine. Nobody leaves their religion when they come into the room in Religions for Peace. But at the very center of the table, we put common problems. Then the question is, what can your community do to help all of us solve this problem that we agree is a common problem? So it's very action-oriented from the very first moment. And once people lock arms in solidarity and stand side by side one another, solving the same problems, they build a relationship that's strong enough to abide their differences in a respectful fashion.
Mm-hmm. Well, we would be remiss if we didn't talk at least a minute or two about Samuel Huntington, and many of us will recall the book that he wrote about the clash of civilizations and how I think he argued that there was a clash between various religions. Is that indeed the case, and does it have to be?
Well, your last phrase, last question is the key. Does it have to be? we can look at history, we can look at the current reality on Earth, and we can say there are clashes, there are misunderstandings, misuses of religion. Religion becomes an identity marker, and then identity groups have problems among themselves. But there is ample evidence that it does not have to be like this. Long periods of time where people have lived with differences with great respect. And indeed, in my just several decades of working at this, I have seen a revolution spread around our earth where it becomes normal for people of diverse religions to work together and respect each other in their differences. A little secret. I've seen not a few, but hundreds of religious people of different persuasions nudge the other and say to them very sincerely, "You've helped me to be a better whatever that person is," whether it's a Buddhist or a Muslim or a Christian. So the irony is that difference can actually foster a more profound appreciation of your own particular religion.
Mm-hmm. Do you have, within RFP, do you do programs, do you multicultural religious workshops, do you bring together folks who may be from different religions who may have misunderstandings, or they come together to talk over their differences and hopefully to find common ground?
Indeed. Many people acknowledge that when they first came to Religions for Peace, they felt a sense of reluctance, a sense of unsurety, and many of those same people end up becoming global leaders of Religions for Peace. So this is a normal experience. We fear what we don't know, and we fear the groups we've not met. And working side by side with people transforms that into, from fear, maybe hostility, to actual bonds of not only respect, but even affection, Bill.
Exactly. And we do have so often have that fear of the unknown.
That's
Once
right.
we know the unknown, we're not as fearful, or maybe not fearful at all, hopefully.
It's not as unknown.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, we see that we do, I mentioned in the opening, we have a multitude of problems around the world that we're dealing with, which is nothing new for humans and people who live on planet Earth to deal with. But we've seen that the United Nations has taken a very active role in helping to confront many of these problems through the Millennium Development Goals that ran from 2000 to 2015, 8 logical quantifiable goals to reduce abject poverty, to promote universal primary school education, empower women. And now there's the new Sustainable Development Goals that were adopted by 193 members of the UN General Assembly in September at the UN. And there are 17 of them focusing on expanding those 8. How do you view these Sustainable Development Goals? We won't have time to go through all of them, but they're the basic ones to eliminate poverty, to have zero hunger, to combat climate change. How do you view these, and what role is Religions for Peace playing in focusing on these development goals?
Well, the first comment, and I say it with a light touch here, this set of goals is so congenial to the religious communities of the world, because it's a holistic vision of what human flourishing should look like. And Bill, you could take those 17 goals and you could say they divide in the following 4 ways. They deal in one part with the vital needs of the poorest. These are human beings, and so we can and we need to address these needs. Secondly, they deal with the need for education, all of us. Girls, everybody needs more education, and this is for all human beings on Earth. Third, brilliantly, the UN uses the word, it's a big word, social inclusion. But what it really means is nobody is to be left out. No group is to be left out, and no person is to be left out. We're injured as a human family if we systematically exclude groups. And finally, we've got to do this in a way that honors the Earth's capacity to be our common home. Now, this is brilliant. The nations of the world have agreed that we've all got to unite, and that this is every single person's business to advance the collective development of the human family in a sustainable way.
Exactly. And we all have a stake in it. We're all we're part of the solution, we're part of the problem, but we all have to work at working together on this. So now in the future, I know you've done a lot in the past and you will be in the future. Do you have various projects, programs on the drawing board right now to focus on these 4 particular areas that you're talking about?
We do. First of all, it's the job of the religious communities to help their own believers connect the dots. Today, to be a good Muslim or to be a good Christian or Buddhist or Jew is to recognize that one's own faith calls one and supports this idea that we are a global human family and that we've got to support something like sustainable development. And the religious communities can help educate their own believers. They can be powerful advocates in their own fora, which are huge all around the world. And thirdly, they have to walk the walk. This means using these enormous capacities that patiently have been built over millennia by the religious communities as the outposts of advancing sustainable development. So we're advancing this work on all those fronts.
Many observers, many scientists believe that climate change is our #1 problem, that it affects everyone on planet Earth. Obviously, we're affected by terrorism, we're affected by unemployment, we're affected by wide diseases, whatever. But climate change impacts everybody. It seems that every region in the world is being affected, in many cases adversely, by climate change. Next month, I believe there will be about 196 countries meeting in Paris in the Climate Change Conference. How important is that conference, and what would you like to see come out of it as far as really addressing in a very tangible way this horrific problem that we're dealing with climate change?
What's clear is that business as usual will be a disaster. That means we have to change course. That's going to take every person on planet Earth being a subject of change, an agent of change, but our governments, and they're the ones meeting, are going to have to take bold and tough decisions in order to change the way we consume or burn carbon on this Earth. There are many dimensions to climate change, but carbon is central. We simply cannot produce energy and consume energy in the same ways we have and still survive as a human species. The stakes are large. The science is clear. This is not a widely debated area in science. We've got to change course. So happily, we see that there is a sea change among the religious communities, among the populations at large. And when that happens, the governments are more empowered to do the right things. So I think we go into these climate change talks in Paris at the end of November and December, early December, encouraged that we begin to see the political will bend the course of business as usual. We have a lot of work to do ahead of us, but we can see that we are starting to take the change we need to take.
Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is an independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. We would encourage our viewers to go to www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view some of our previous programs. Also, we would encourage you to submit suggestions for future topics and perhaps future guests. Today we're taking a look at a very unique organization, the Religions for Peace, and we're looking at the role that religions, religious leaders, and followers can really come together to help overcome many of the major problems affecting people and all living organisms on planet Earth. My guest today is an expert on all of these issues. My guest today is Dr. William Vendley. Dr. William Vendley is the Secretary General of Religions for Peace. We're talking about climate change. Again, the Paris summit that's coming up. There have been just a large, so we can't go through all of them today, but a large number of world leaders, scientists, personalities, just rank and file people like myself and others who see the disasters that are taking place with climate change. One of the most outspoken and most highly visible persons has been Pope Francis, the leader of the Roman Catholic Church. He recently had sort of a mini summit, I guess, a mini climate change summit in Rome. What was his role in that, and what has his role been in really moving this discussion forward, and what role did you have perhaps in that in Rome, or the Vatican City, I guess is where it was, with the Pope?
Well, happily, the Pope Francis is addressing the human family and noting very particularly his fellow religious colleagues of diverse faiths. The document that he just produced, Laudato Si, ends with two prayers. One is a prayer for Christians, but the other is an interreligious prayer, and the Pope is trying to underline his conviction that it's Islamic leaders and Buddhist leaders and Hindus and Jews and Sikhs and Jains and others that each have to take their great responsibility. The point here is that we have to look from the point of view of wisdom. The Pope is asking, and the other religious leaders are asking us to be wise people. We've got to do the science. We've got to attend to the painful politics of how we're going to change course. But let's stand back. Let's build bridges across all of our fields and across the divides and recognize that this is our home. We've got to honor the fact that we and all of the other species we depend on share the same home. And so I think the Pope and the other religious leaders are not trying to do the work of scientists or the work of politicians, but properly they're raising the debate from the point of view of collective wisdom. Shall we go forward as a human family? Shall we go forward in a home that is a garden, or will we leave a scorched desert to our children? Those are the ultimate stakes.
Exactly, and they're the highest stakes there can be.
Yeah.
That's true. Now you have a program, Faiths for Earth campaign. What exactly is that?
It's very simple. We have reached out to men and women of goodwill, many believers and many of goodwill from other sources all around the world to sign on to a very simple pledge calling upon their own head of state and certainly addressing the UN Secretary General that we've got to go to renewable energies by 2050. This is simply a requirement. It's going to take all of us changing our habits. It's going to take special forms of relationship between developed states and developing states, the scientific community and the world of economy, but we can do this, Bill. And this is a campaign to raise the temperature and help all people around the world to recognize they're not alone. This is what families want all over the world. This is not left field or right field. This is right up the center. We all want an Earth that we can call home.
And climate change is certainly raising the temperature around the globe. That is documented. That's proven. I think these last 8 of the 10 years have been the hottest on record.
That's right,
this year has been the hottest.
Yeah.
Another thing that could certainly raise the temperature is if we had a nuclear weapon exchange, and that is a major problem. We see that there's been a bit of a little reduction in nuclear weapons, but the firepower is just immense. What can be done, and why? Well, first off, why should we try to reduce or eliminate nuclear weapons, and what can we do to do that?
Well, Bill, we've already outlawed a lot of weapons of mass destruction. The use of chemical weapons in the First World War was so hideous that people decided it was beyond the pale. We can't do that. We can't use these weapons of hideous destruction and indiscriminate. They can't discriminate. The wind blows and the gas went over someplace else. Now, the nuclear weapons, we've been up to the brink. Nikita Khrushchev and John Kennedy stared into the abyss and backed away. And we had some remarkable wisdom that moved us towards eliminating nuclear weapons. But we've grown too comfortable in that space. We still own them. We still possess them. They're still armed. The weapon systems are armed, and they're still aimed, targeted at cities where children, elderly, ordinary families are living. Bill, there's the possibility of mistake. And secondly, you can't take the targeting out of the way the weapons are currently deployed. So all around the world, we've begun to question, can we accept it as normal that we still are targeting mass annihilation against one another? That needs to be never diminished from the front of our vision. And it's very, very hard to ask other states not to arm themselves with nuclear weapons if the states who have them aren't relentlessly moving towards an abolishment of nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm.
There's great unanimity among the world's diverse religions that this is a moral obligation.
Mm-hmm. And all we have to do is read the history books or think back to 1962 with the Cuban Missile Crisis, where the U.S. and the former Soviet Union were poised at the point to hit the last button, the red button, which would have been a nuclear exchange or an atomic energy exchange at that rate at that time. How devastating would that have been, and would we be here today if that had happened?
Well, the chilling point is that senior advisors to President Kennedy and senior advisors to Nikita Khrushchev advised a course of action that would have led to a nuclear holocaust. Mm-hmm. We were that close. Now, we were spared that. And I think it was the moral sentiment that won out. Both of these leaders had enough grounding in humanity to understand this is not the course the human family wants. Bill, in another way, we're at a similar precipice with the climate change. It may look like a long reach from nuclear standoff to climate, but the human family is at the same point. We have to change course, and I think that we can, and going back to Paris with climate change, we can do that, and we've got to complete the nuclear work as well. So these are areas where we need great technical expertise, but most of all, we need moral conviction, and that moral conviction has to be translated into political will. And that's where we really, I think, are able to build alliances across countries and across religions.
Exactly. Well, this year we see it's the 70th anniversary of the United Nations, a relatively young organization created in 1945. The UN, the role of the United Nations, the mission of the UN, the programs have changed quite dramatically since the UN was basically founded out of the ruins, the ashes of World War II. But as you look at where the UN is today, you look at the issues we're dealing with that were not even on the table in 1945. Climate change, very few people talked about it or even thought about it. What would be your message for the world as far as how we should use the United Nations, could use the United Nations, and involve everyone to be actively participating in dealing with these problems, such as climate change or unemployment or whatever the case may be?
Bill, if we didn't have the UN, we'd have to reinvent it. The simple facts are, as we live in a single world, we still live in different states, but these states have to cooperate. They have to cooperate about the air, the oceans, trade, the well-being of one. Today, we're as secure as the least secure among us. We have to cooperate, and the UN is the instrument of cooperation among the states.
You are quite right there. That's very, very important. Now, I know you've been involved with many memorable personalities. You've been involved in some of the most dangerous places on the earth, dealing with some of the most intractable problems. Are there, in our last 30 seconds or so, are there one or two that come to the surface that that are perhaps that rise a little above some of the others, or some of the most poignant memories that you have, either of places, events, or people?
There's so many. We all need good institutions, but we know there are places where the institutions are failing. Can we still say that reality is good? I was taken into a big field filled with refugees. It was a bare field. It was in Sierra Leone at the end of a brutal civil war. The trucks, the relief trucks, you couldn't hear them. They were still several weeks away. But is there reason for confidence and faith? Well, the Muslims brought me over to a part of the field where they'd laid sticks out in a rectangle. And they said, "Here, Dr. Vendley, come to our mosque." Well, there was nothing in the field except for people and refugees. And then the Christians took me over to the other side of the field, and they'd laid out sticks and said, "Here, Dr. Vendley, here's the church." Well, what I'm saying here, Bill, is that I'm impressed that when we're in the places of the greatest extremity, the greatest difficulty, the human spirit is still there. People are unbelievably kind often to one another. They bear the unbearable. They find hope where there don't appear to be grounds for hope. And they often forgive the unforgivable. This still calls us to build institutions, to work for justice, but it gives us some sense that we're not working alone, we're not working against reality, we can work with reality as we try to build decent and good societies. So I take a lot of strength from the people that I observe all over the world, often working with little, but often sharing all that they have.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dr. William Vendley, Secretary General of Religions for Peace, these are important issues you're discussing, and we all need to work on them. And I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Thanks, Bill, very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television.